Daniel's breath caught in his throat as the light revealed more details. The SUV was almost fully concealed beneath layers of snow and broken tree limbs. It had veered off the path and crashed into a thick pine tree, hard enough to cave in the front end. The impact must have been violent, yet there were no skid marks, no signs anyone had seen this until now. "Good Lord," Daniel whispered, tightening his coat against the cold. He stepped closer, crunching through the snow, his flashlight scanning. The vehicle's side. One window was completely shattered, another frosted over from inside. The dog barked louder now, circling the vehicle, tail wagging low but urgent. It stopped at the passenger door and pawed at it desperately, whining as it pressed its nose to the glass. Daniel's training kicked in. He pulled his radio. "This is Unit 12. I have located a vehicle off Route 17. Appears to be a single car. Accident deep off-road. Vehicle overturned into a tree. Requesting EMS and backup. One possible survivor inside." "Copy that, Unit 12. Response team en route." The voice crackled back. Daniel turned off his flashlight and reached for the handle. The door wouldn't budge. He tried the rear door, jammed. Without wasting another second, he pulled the small crowbar from his trunk, smashed the side window, and cleared the glass with gloved hands. Inside it was silent, except for the faintest sound, a shallow breath. A girl no older than 16 was curled up in the back seat. Her lips were blue, her body wrapped in a thin hoodie. Her cheeks were pale as snow, eyes closed, barely conscious. Her fingers were stiff, locked around a torn backpack, like it was the only thing keeping her anchored to the world. Daniel climbed. Halfway in, heart pounding. Hey, stay with me, can you hear me?" The girl stirred slightly, her eyelids fluttering. "You're going to be okay," he said, wrapping her in an emergency blanket from his kit. He gently lifted her out, cradling her like fragile glass, and made his way back to the cruiser. As he placed her on the heated back seat, the German Shepherd climbed in too, uninvited, and laid its head on the girl's lap. Daniel didn't stop. Him. He turned on the heater full blast and watched the girl's chest rise and fall with a little more strength now. The dog nuzzled her hand and whimpered softly. Daniel stared at the two of them in disbelief. If that dog hadn't flagged him, Down hadn't let him off-road at exactly that moment, she wouldn't have lasted another hour. He reached out and stroked the dog's head. "You're a smart one, aren't you?" The dog gave a soft bark, then laid down beside her again, and for the first time that night, Daniel didn't feel alone in the storm. As the patrol car warmed and the girl's shallow breathing steadied, Officer Daniel Hughes couldn't help but glance at the dog every few seconds. The German Shepherd hadn't moved from her side. It was almost as if he believed the warmth from his own body might keep her alive. The blizzard outside intensified. The windows fogged. Time moved slowly. Daniel radioed again. "This is Unit 12. Victim is a teenage female, unresponsive but breathing. Severe hypothermia, ETA on EMS?" 10 minutes out, they're navigating around a fallen tree. "Hang tight," dispatch replied. 10 minutes in this cold felt like a lifetime. He leaned over and took the girl's pulse, faint but present. Her lips were still tinged blue. Daniel carefully lifted her hand and rubbed it between his gloved palms. The dog's eyes followed his every move, full of something Daniel couldn't quite explain. Intelligence, concern, faith. "You must have stayed with her all night," he murmured to the dog. "Most people would have run for shelter." The shepherd's ears perked at his voice. Then it nudged the girl gently, releasing a small whine. Daniel pulled a spare thermal blanket from the trunk and covered both of them. The snow outside seemed to get heavier by the second, but he no longer noticed. All his focus was on the girl, and the dog who refused to leave her side. Then slowly the girl stirred. Her eyelids fluttered again, and this time they didn't close. She blinked groggily, trying to focus. "You're safe," Daniel said softly. "Help is on the way." She coughed once, then tried to speak, but her lips were too dry. Daniel reached for a bottle of water and held it gently to her mouth. "Just a sip." She drank slowly, then looked down at the dog beside her. "Bear," she whispered hoarsely. Daniel glanced at the shepherd. "That his name?" She nodded slightly, tears forming in the corners of her eyes. "You've got a brave friend," he said. Moments later, flashing red and blue lights appeared through the snow, an ambulance finally arriving. Paramedics rushed out, slipping slightly on the ice as they made their way to the car. "We've got a pulse," Daniel said as they approached. "Severe hypothermia, minor head trauma. Found her inside a wreck about 400 yards into the woods. This dog led me there." The medics took over, wrapping the girl in insulated sheets and checking vitals. Bear growled as one medic got too close too fast, but Daniel placed a hand on his back. "It's okay. They're here to help." Bear relaxed, though he kept one eye fixed on the girl. As the medics lifted her onto the stretcher, she reached for Bear weakly. "He's coming," Daniel reassured her. "I promise." Bear jumped into the back of the ambulance on his own, curling up right beside her. No one dared stop him. Daniel stood in the falling snow, watching the taillights disappear into the storm. He felt a strange tightness in his chest, part awe, part relief. He had seen a lot in his years on the force, but this, a dog who braved a snowstorm, flagged down a car, and led him through the woods to save a girl. It didn't feel like chance, it felt like fate. As he walked back to his cruiser, he muttered under his breath, "That dog deserves a medal." What he didn't know was that Bear's story was just beginning, and the world was about to hear it. At the emergency room, the hospital team moved fast. Emily Carter, 16, with a minor concussion, deep bruises and borderline hypothermia, was stabilized within the hour. But every doctor who checked her vitals and reviewed her scans kept saying the same thing. If she'd arrived 30 minutes later, she wouldn't have survived the night. Outside the trauma room, Officer Hughes waited, coat still dusted with snow. He'd refused to go home. Bear, the German shepherd, sat beside him in the hallway, calmly watching every movement with alert eyes. Nurses passed, some whispering, others stopping to pet Bear. No one tried to remove him. They all knew, without him, the girl on the hospital. Bed wouldn't be alive. Finally, a doctor emerged. "She's stable," he told Daniel. "She'll be okay. You saved her life." Daniel shook his head. "I didn't find her, he did." He gestured to Bear, who thumped his tail once as if understanding the compliment. The doctor looked at the dog with a smile. "Then we owe him our thanks." Back in the room, Emily opened her eyes again. Her parents, Michelle and Tom Carter, rushed to her side, both tear-streaked and breathless. It was a reunion full of sobs, quiet thanks and disbelief. Daniel stepped inside a moment later. Emily spotted Bear curled up near the door and managed a weak smile. "I knew he'd stay," she whispered. Michelle turned to Daniel. "They said, you found her because of the dog." He nodded. "He ran into the middle of the road and wouldn't leave me alone, led me through a blizzard straight to her." Tom stared, stunned. "But Bear broke free from the car?" Emily's voice cracked, still weak. "He climbed out. After the crash, I was trapped. I passed out. I thought he ran away." Daniel shook his head. "He didn't run. He went to find help, in a storm, in the middle of nowhere." Tears welled again in Michelle's eyes as she looked at Bear. "He saved her. That dog saved our daughter." Later that night, as Emily rested and her parents sat at her bedside, Daniel stayed behind to fill out reports. He wasn't one to get emotional on the job, but something about this entire night shook him in a way he couldn't explain. There were accidents every winter. Too many ended in tragedy, but this one had a different ending because of one dog's courage. He stared at Bear, now sleeping curled against Emily's bed. His fur was still damp from the snow, and a scratch above. His eye had started to scab, but he looked peaceful now, his job done. Daniel pulled out his phone and took a photo, not for evidence, for memory, because he knew this moment wasn't just about a rescue, it was about loyalty, instinct, and the silent bond between a girl and her dog, a bond strong enough to chase through a blizzard and change everything. 3 days after the rescue, a nurse at the hospital posted a photo on social media. It was simple, just a quiet moment in Emily's recovery room. She lay sleeping, pale but safe, her hand resting on Bear's head. The caption read, "This dog flagged down a police officer during a snowstorm and saved this girl's life. Hero doesn't even begin to describe him." Within hours, the post went viral. Local news picked it up first, then regional stations. By the next morning, major national outlets were calling the hospital, requesting interviews with Officer Daniel Hughes, the Carter family, and anyone who had met the mysterious German shepherd who who'd braved the blizzard. German Shepherd rescues. Teen in snowstorm. Loyal dog leads police to crashed car, saves owner's life. Meet Bear, America's new hero dog. The headlines flooded every platform. People were captivated. Something about the story, a silent road, a dog's determination, and a life saved by instinct and loyalty, touched a nerve across the country. Back at the hospital, the attention came as a shock. Emily was still regaining strength. Her head injury had left her sensitive to light and sound, and the frostbite on her hands would take weeks to fully heal. But whenever someone mentioned Bear's name, her face lit up. "I thought I was going to die," she whispered to a reporter. "I really did. And then he left. I thought I'd never see him again, but he found someone, he found help." Tom Carter sat beside her, protective and still shaken. "We were planning her funeral. Now we're planning her homecoming." The reporters smiled, tears visible in their eyes. Even the toughest camera crews had trouble keeping their emotions in check. And then came the calls. Animal rescue organizations, dog trainers, award committees. Bear, oblivious to the media storm, simply curled up beside Emily every night and nuzzled her hand with the same calm he always had. He didn't need applause. He'd done what any loyal friend would do. Officer Daniel Hughes wasn't much for the spotlight, but even he had to admit, seeing Bear's face on television made something in his chest tighten. There was a purity to the story that stood out in a world filled with chaos. "This dog made the kind of call humans sometimes fail to make," he said in one interview. "He didn't panic. He didn't run. He made a choice. That girl is alive because of it." But with the attention came pressure. A local animal behaviorist reached out, questioning how the dog knew what to do. A talk show offered to fly the family and Bear to New York for a segment. A pet food company wanted to sponsor Bear for life. The Carters were overwhelmed. "We're just grateful our daughter is alive," Michelle told one reporter. "We didn't expect the world to fall in love with her dog, too." But the world had. And as more people learned about Bear's bravery, something incredible began to unfold. Letters poured into the hospital, hundreds of them. Children sent hand-drawn pictures of Bear wearing superhero capes. Veterans wrote about how their service dogs saved them too. Strangers from around the world sent blankets, treats, and heartfelt notes. One letter from a retired paramedic read, "In 25 years on the job, I've never seen an animal do something this purposeful. Bear is more than a pet, he's a partner." What started as a stormy night on a snowy road had now become something bigger, a symbol of hope, loyalty, and love that wouldn't quit. But for Emily and Bear, the journey wasn't over. There was still more to uncover about the accident, Bear's past, and the life ahead. As the world celebrated Bear's heroism, Emily's recovery progressed steadily. After nearly 2 weeks, doctors cleared her to go home. Though still weak, she could walk short distances, and her speech had returned to normal. Her frost-bitten hands, though bandaged, could move again. Bear never left her side. Every step she took, he was there. Every visitor he watched closely. He slept outside her door, woke when she stirred, and whined softly whenever she felt pain. For the Carter family, Bear was no longer just a pet. He was a guardian. But just as life seemed to return to normal, a phone call changed everything. It came on a Thursday afternoon when Officer Daniel Hughes was writing up a report at the station. "Officer Hughes," a woman's voice said over the line. "This is Evelyn Ross from the Jackson County shelter. I saw the news reports about the dog Bear, right? The one who saved the girl." Daniel leaned forward. "Yes. What about him?" She hesitated. "I think that might be our dog, or at least the dog that went missing from our facility 6 months ago." Daniel froze. "Missing?" "Yes. His name was Max in our system. A German Shepherd, just like Bear. Same coloring, same eyes. He was brought in from a military training facility. Failed his evaluation. Too stubborn, too protective. Not aggressive. Just independent. No one wanted him." Daniel blinked. "Wait, he was trained, like military trained?" "Yes, he was part of a failed K9 program. The kind of dog that doesn't listen to just anyone. But we believe he was stolen. Disappeared one night from the kennel. We filed a report but never heard anything again until I saw him on TV." Daniel sat silently, staring at his desk. A military-trained dog Rejected and stolen. Who ended up saving a teenage girl in the middle of a snowstorm? You're sure it's the same dog? He asked. We'd need a microchip scan to confirm. But if it is, technically, Bear belongs to the government. Back at the Carter house, Emily was trying to get up the stairs for the first time. She moved slowly, Bear at her side, his body steady like a living crutch. She gripped the railing and leaned against him, one step at a time. Her father watched nervously from behind. You sure you don't want help? I've got Bear, she said, smiling. He's all I need. But just hours later, Daniel arrived at their door with heavy news. Emily's face fell as he explained what the shelter had told him. No, she said immediately. They can't take him. He's not just a dog, he's my dog, he saved my life. Michelle's hand tightened on her daughter's shoulder. Is this serious? Daniel nodded. If the scan shows a match, they might demand his return, especially if he was part of a government program. Tom Carter's voice was firm. Then we fight it. Bear stood still during the conversation, ears perked, eyes on Emily. It was as if he understood the tension in the room. The next morning, they took Bear to the vet. The microchip was there and the ID matched Max, former property of a discontinued K-9 program, marked as non-returnable subject to reassignment. Technically, Bear didn't belong to anyone, but legally things were murky. Emily sat on the vet's floor, arms wrapped around Bear's neck, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. They can't take him, she whispered. He chose me, and he had. The question was, would that choice be enough? News of Bear's microchip discovery spread quickly. What had been a feel-good story about a heroic dog now became a legal whirlwind. Some headlines read, Hero Dog, may be taken from teen he saved. Military reject or guardian angel. The fight over Bear begins. The Carters were overwhelmed. They hadn't asked for fame, and certainly not for legal threats. But when officials from the now-defunct K-9 program contacted them, the message was clear. Bear, formerly known as Max, was government property. And despite being declared unsuitable for service, his training, background, and original ownership gave them legal leverage. A court hearing was scheduled. The idea of walking into a courtroom to defend a dog seemed ridiculous to some. But to Emily, it felt like fighting for family. At home, Bear sensed the tension. He followed Emily more closely than ever, as if he feared he might be taken from her. She barely left the house, afraid someone might show up with a leash and papers. Her parents consulted with lawyers. Local community groups began organizing support. Then something remarkable happened. It started with a petition. A local teen who had read about Bear's story online created one. Let Bear stay with the girl he saved. Within 48 hours, it had over 250,000 signatures. Soon after, TV hosts and celebrities began speaking up. A famous actor tweeted, "A dog who saved a girl's life doesn't belong in a facility. He belongs with her." A retired Marine posted a video explaining how K-9s choose their handlers just as much as handlers choose them. "I've served with dogs like Bear," he said. "You don't assign loyalty, you earn it." In the Carter household, it all felt surreal. One moment they were planning Emily's recovery. The next, they were at the center of a global conversation about animal loyalty, ownership rights, and love. But to Emily, it wasn't about news or numbers. "He didn't come into my life with papers," she told one reporter. "He came into my life when I needed him. He found me. He saved me. That makes him mine." The family's attorney made the argument clear. Bear had been declared unsuitable and was never reclaimed. No one looked for him when he disappeared. He was not part of any current government program, and more importantly, he was no longer just a dog. He was part of a family. The courtroom was packed on the day of the hearing. Reporters lined the sidewalk. Protesters held signs that read, "Let Bear stay," and "He saved her, now save him." Inside, Emily sat nervously in the front row, Bear at her feet. He wore a simple vest that said "Hero" and stayed still throughout, eyes locked on her face. The government's representative argued protocol, ownership, paper trails. Emily's lawyer argued heart, duty, and the undeniable truth that Bear had not only proven his value, but had bonded with a human life in a way few ever do. Near the end of the hearing, the judge finally turned to Emily. "Miss Carter," he said, "in your words, what does Bear mean to you?" Emily stood slowly, gripping her mother's hand, then looked at Bear. "He's my best friend," she said, voice shaking. "He didn't care about rules or who I belonged to. He just knew I needed help, and he came. Please don't make me lose him now." Bear's ears twitched as she spoke, eyes never leaving hers. The courtroom fell silent. The judge nodded once. "I've heard enough." The air inside the courtroom was heavy with silence. Everyone, from journalists to protesters outside, from the Carters to Bear himself, waited as the judge lifted the final folder from the bench. He glanced briefly at the packed room, then settled his gaze on Emily and Bear. "This case is unlike any I've ever seen," he began. "It is not just about legality, it's about loyalty and survival." He paused. While the government once had rightful ownership over the dog known as Max, he was released from duty, marked unsuitable, and never reclaimed. He was, for all intents and purposes, abandoned. A murmur spread across the room, and yet the judge continued, "This dog, abandoned, unclaimed, unwanted, performed a selfless act that resulted in the saving of a human life. He did not act out of command. He acted out of loyalty and instinct." Emily held her breath, her hand resting on Bear's back. Bear didn't move, but his eyes remained locked on her face. "I therefore find that Bear is not to be returned to any government agency or program. Effective immediately, legal ownership is granted to Emily Carter." The room erupted. Cheers, sobs, applause. Reporters dropped their pens and lifted cameras as Emily covered her face, crying into Bear's fur. He stood, tail wagging gently, sensing the mood. He licked her hand once. He was home for good. Outside the courthouse, a sea of people waited. The moment Emily and Bear emerged, the crowd broke into spontaneous applause. Someone handed her a bouquet. Another gave Bear a bright red collar with a golden tag that read, "Forever Hero." TV reporters swarmed. "Emily, how do you feel?" She looked down at Bear. "Like I finally get to breathe again." The Carter family issued a simple statement. "Bear is not just a hero. He is a member of our family, and he always will be." That night, the story made international headlines again. This time not about ownership, but about love, justice, and the unbreakable bond between a dog and the girl he saved. The next week, Bear was awarded a National Animal Bravery Medal. The ceremony, attended by rescue workers, military handlers, and fellow service dogs, Emily gave a short speech. "Bear didn't ask for attention," she said, voice steady now. "He didn't wear a badge or carry orders, but he made the most important decision any of us could make. He chose to save a life." The room gave her a standing ovation. Even the other dogs barked in what felt like applause. In the months that followed, Bear's fame only grew, but the Carters worked to keep life grounded. Emily returned to school part-time, always with Bear waiting outside the door. She still needed therapy, both physical and emotional, but every session was easier with Bear beside her. A children's book about Bear was published, The Dog Who Walked Through a Storm. It became a bestseller. Bear was even invited to ride in the Thanksgiving parade, but Emily politely declined. "He's done enough," she said. "He deserves peace, not spotlights." Instead, they focused on a new mission, advocating for rescue dogs and unwanted service animals. With help from their lawyer and Officer Hughes, the family launched a non-profit, Bear's Way Loyalty for Life. It helped fund adoptions, support training for difficult dogs, and connected K9 units with struggling families, all inspired by one dog. One snowy night, one act of courage. But for Emily, the real victory wasn't on TV or in the papers. It was at home. Every morning she woke to the sound of Bear's gentle breathing. Every night he curled beside her bed. He had saved her once. Now they saved each other. Every day. Months turned into a year, but Bear's place in the Carter family remained unshakable. The headlines faded, but the story of that snowy night and the dog who flagged down a police officer never left their hearts. Emily's recovery continued slowly but surely. Her scars, both visible and invisible, healed with time. The doctors said her memory of the accident would never fully return, but that didn't matter. What mattered was the life Bear helped save. The small town where they lived embraced Bear as a local hero. Children waved at him in the streets. Shops displayed his picture in their windows. Teachers told his story in classrooms to inspire kindness and courage. Emily, now stronger and more confident, spent her afternoons volunteering at the very animal shelter Bear once escaped from. She helped train dogs, especially those with difficult pasts, teaching them patience and love. Bear never forgot his own journey. He remained protective but gentle, always ready to comfort the scared or the lonely. One crisp autumn afternoon, Emily sat on the porch with Bear nestled beside her. The golden leaves drifted down around them like a slow, silent snowfall. "I think about that night a lot," she said softly. "How close I came to never seeing the world again." Bear lifted his head, his amber eyes locked on hers as if to say, "But I was there." "I'm so glad you were," she smiled, reaching down to scratch behind his ears. She often wondered about Bear's past, the military training, the lost months before the accident, the freedom he found with her. He was more than a dog. He was a survivor, a fighter, her friend, and she was forever grateful. The family had grown close with Officer Daniel Hughes, who remained a steady friend and occasional visitor. He often joked that Bear had saved 2 lives that night, Emily's and his, because it reminded him why he became a cop in the first place. One evening after a neighborhood fundraiser for Bear's Way, Emily and Daniel sat talking under the stars. "You know," Daniel said, "it's rare you meet a dog like Bear. Most dogs don't have that kind of instinct, that kind of heart." Emily nodded. "He's the bravest dog I know." Daniel smiled. "And he's lucky to have you." As the years passed, Bear's story inspired countless others. Families adopted dogs who had been abandoned or deemed unsuitable. Communities started programs for service dogs who needed a second chance. The ripple effect of one snowy night reached far beyond that lonely road. Emily sometimes received letters from people who'd read her story. Children wrote about how Bear gave them hope. Veterans wrote about dogs who saved their lives too. She kept every letter in a box, a treasure trove of gratitude and connection. One day she pulled out a letter from a young boy named Jake. "Dear Emily," it read, "my dog was scared and shy. But after reading about Bear, I believe my dog can be brave too. Thank you for sharing your story." Emily smiled through tears. In the quiet moments, Bear was still just a dog, a companion who loved walks, naps, and the occasional treat. But to Emily, he was a symbol of something greater: loyalty, hope, and the quiet power of love. When the snow fell again the following winter, Emily remembered that terrifying night. But she didn't fear the cold or the dark anymore, because Bear was with her always.